unmuted, is that right? Yep, so everyone can hear us all right, hopefully. So yeah, welcome along to everyone. I'll turn my mic on, sorry. We'll just take a wee moment to warm up, but hopefully everyone can hear anyway. So yeah, thanks to everyone that's joined us this morning on what is a pretty rainy one here, probably quite rainy in Queenstown too, but certainly is here. We have got staff from Queenstown, but we'll just do an introduction in a moment of who we've got and how we're going to run the workshop. I'll just begin as we normally do with a karakia. Tue ki runga, tue ki raro, tue ki waho, tue ki roto, tue ki te here tangara, ka rongo te pō, ka rongo te ao, humie, huie, taiki e. So yeah, we are having a workshop on negotiating a regional deal for Otago Central Lakes, which is the Central Otago and the Queenstown District, and us as well involved as a partner in that. So you've had some information as part of this workshop, so hopefully we've got that there. And
sorry, it's just getting put up onto the now, so you can follow along. Just
cool.
Slide pack.
Just a slide pack. So yeah, we'll be going through some slides. So yeah, the main purpose of today is to relook at that light touch and have a talk about some of the priorities that we might have within that from our perspective, and also should we be in a position of negotiating with the Crown on a regional deal, as we'd hope we might be, what would that look like as well? So yeah, I'm going to hand over to Richard first of all, and he'll have a bit of a talk about that setting, and then we'll probably hand over to Queenstown as we go through the slide pack, and Anita as well. Thanks, Richard.
Thanks, Gretchen. Yeah, the apologies, the slides are coming into Diligent shortly. If they're not there, they're there now. Great, thanks, Kate. So they are in there.
Right.
So you can follow along. There's no additional content for today's workshop, just what's in the slides. So you look welcome to Penny and Anita. Thank you for making the time this morning, and Penny will walk us through a few of the slides in the front end of the workshop. There is a fairly important paper at QLDC this afternoon on local water done well, as I understand, so they couldn't be here in person, but great to have a few hours of your time this morning just to help us step through this part of the process. So as we know, we had the light touch proposal submitted sometime early this calendar year. And we know through those discussions at the time that there were some reservations expressed around the process, around how many or how much of an opportunity there was for ORC councillors to review the content that formed that light touch proposal. And at the time, it was noted that it was the first step in the process, and obviously a whole lot of water to go under the bridge in terms of what a regional deal actually is and how that plays out, and what content may end up in anything that ends up in front of the government and three councils in the future. So that light touch proposal has gone in. Since that time, there has been engagement with DIA, and that's on the process. So again, the content is the content. The light touch went up, and that's what has been submitted on behalf of the three councils as the proposal. But there has been conversations with DIA trying to get clarity on exactly what the process should be. So I should have said too, Dylan Rushbrook is online. So Dylan is a general manager from Central Otago District Council who's leading their process. So just to clear up who was on the screen as well. I just saw his name pop up. So welcome, Dylan. So as I said, there's been trying to get greater clarity on the process that councils will need to go through should our proposal be selected to progress through the government's process. It would be fair to say that regional deals are a new process, or they're a new thing, and the process for establishing them very much is being developed as everybody goes along. So there isn't absolute clarity. And my sense is, in order to be part of this process and to take any opportunities that do arise, we are going to need to remain flexible and responding to DIA, who are obviously responding to the instructions that they're getting from government ministers. So it would be fair to say that there has been shifts in the process as the conversations have gone along. But we are starting to get greater clarity, and that's part of what we'll share with you and get feedback from you on today. But again, my sense is that, these regional deal processes, the government is putting a lot of emphasis on them. As I understand it, there are discussions with both the government and the opposition around regional deals and the fact that they are supported and will become a long-term thing in the central government, local government landscape. And so the opportunity we have, should we be selected to be part of that negotiation and to get some benefits and become established in that process and develop them as time goes on, is a good one. So we just, I think, need to keep that in mind, albeit I appreciate there are some frustrations around lack of information and lack of clarity. We're all working in that environment at the moment. So purpose of today, there are signals from central government that they will select the regions that they would like to negotiate with sometime in June and July. So that's the next thing we're waiting on is the Queenstown Otago Central Otago, or Queenstown Lake Central Otago ORC deal one that they believe has merit, and that they would like to put forward for further negotiation. So that's the next step. If it is chosen, then we as a collective group need to be ready to sit down and negotiate under whatever form the government and the DIA create. And obviously there can be some discussions about that. What we want to do today is review the key elements of the light touch proposal, and Penny will walk us through those. It's a chance for council councillors to reflect on what was in there that you feel is a priority, what's not in there that you think could have been given some thought, and what was in there that, on reflection, potentially is not a priority or something that could be given consideration. It is a workshop, there's no decisions to be made. But I think it's timely, given we haven't had a good look at the content since the light touch proposal went in, just to spend some time reflecting on that and getting some feedback from council. And then the second part is having a look at what the negotiation process might look like. And that's based on feedback we've had from the DIA around how the government sees that process working. And I think it's important for councillors to have a discussion about that and the level of comfort with different models. And that's with a view to bringing a paper back to the 25 June meeting. And you can see on that slide, there's workshops being held this week, and then proposal for papers to come back at the end of June. And the content of those papers, again, focusing on key parts of the light touch and some guidance, but also how councils may choose to set themselves up for negotiation should the deal be selected. So that's by way of intro why we're here. Plenty of time today just to have discussion amongst councillors around priorities, things that are top of mind, things that should be being thought about. But I will hand over to Penny to kick us off, just in terms of a refresher of the proposal itself.
Can I just say as well, Richard, that when we're thinking about priorities, I guess there's priorities for us as to what our functions might be, but I guess as a regional council, as an enabler as well, we'd be I guess stretching our minds to what is the role that we would play in a regional deal too, of enabling district councils as well to do what they feel are priorities as well. And also, I suppose, if you were negotiating, what you would put up as a priority might not be your big ticket item, but might be something that the government would feel was a priority to tick off early on. So I suppose the strategic priorities, there's our role and our function priorities, and then there's priorities of the entire entity. So yeah, I guess thinking about that too. But yeah, over to Penny. Thanks.
Kia ora koutou. What I'll try and do just running through this is focus a bit more on the areas that are more relevant to Otago Regional Council, but I will run through the whole thing. So sorry, I can't control, there we go. So the first thing I just, it's worth reminding everybody of is the package of things that we put together as part of the proposal are all grounded in the existing strategic documents or strategies across QLDC, CODC and ORC. So we have leaned pretty heavily on the existing strategic direction in terms of where the districts are wanting to go in the future. And we've landed on things where there was commonality and agreement, where we had common issues that we needed to solve, common challenges and common opportunities, where there could be approaches that could be used across both districts. The overarching, so if you can go to the next slide, the overarching kind of focus of the deal is really building on the dominant sectors of tourism and agriculture. We want the growth for the districts to lean into visitation and investment, which is what the government is highlighting as priorities. But we want to make sure that we remain the attractive and livable place where talent, investors, residents, and visitors actually want to be. So you will all be familiar with the issues that we have in Queenstown and Queenstown Lakes and housing, in central Otago. It's heading that way pretty quickly. And we have urgent improvements to critical infrastructure that are needed and different ways of thinking about affordable housing, so that we can successfully deliver on the vision of economic growth and support the growth that we know is coming. So as we highlighted in the proposal, there's an opportunity if we can focus on growing the more productive sectors across the districts. So increasing productivity in tourism, increasing tourism and CODC on the CODC side, and increasing the setting or improving the settings to enable more productive, more highly productive sectors to flourish. That there's an opportunity to add additional GDP growth to the district. So the productivity across the two districts is 10% lower than New Zealand. So if we could bring that up to the productivity of the rest of New Zealand, that would enable us to deliver an additional $1 billion of growth over the 10-year period. But the other thing to highlight is that kind of current trends would indicate that we're going to go from 6 billion GDP across the two districts to 11 billion over the next 10 years. However, those current trends may not continue on that trajectory if the critical infrastructure and housing, affordable housing challenges that we're currently facing aren't addressed. So there's both an opportunity to add additional growth, economic growth, through focusing on productivity, but also some of the projected growth is at risk if we don't address the infrastructure issues that we already have. So this is the first element of the deal was about focusing specifically on how you increase, how we directly grow the economy based on focusing on productivity of the economy. So we want to be able to leverage our unique position, increasing the total value of tourism, but also enabling productive industries to thrive. So this package was about asking for bespoke settings from the government that would enable the districts to attract and build and grow sectors that aren't tourism, so sectors that are more highly productive. So how can agriculture be boosted further? How could we attract technology businesses in line with Technology Queenstown's plans? It's also focused on looking for ways to increase productivity within tourism, because tourism is a low productivity sector anyway. So asking for some tools to help with increasing the tourism there. The productivity there. Also, this is also looking at the Invest NZ. Don't know if it's a policy, but the Invest in NZ concept that the government is currently implementing. How we can be part of that, leverage their focus on that, bringing investment into New Zealand by having a presence for Invest NZ in the Otago Central Lakes District, in order to be the shop front for international investment and business establishment. Next one. So this is the one that I think you'll be the most interested in. Obviously lifting productivity and actually just enabling a good quality of life for our residents, which is actually what all of these projects are about for us. Requires us to have the right enablers. So we have to have the right infrastructure and services in place and the right ways of funding, financing and delivering those in order to enable that. So in the transport space, you will obviously all be familiar with the fact that a lot of strategic work has happened for Queenstown in particular, in terms of what is needed here to respond to growth. You'll also be familiar with the fact that growth has happened faster than what was predicted when that strategic work was done, and through all the business cases, and that the investment in the interventions for that has happened slower. And that work had not previously incorporated how we think about Central Otago and Queenstown and Wanaka as part of a connected system where the workforce is actually dispersed across a much wider geographic area than just Queenstown. So what this is asking for is really to get commitment from all of the partners to refresh the transport strategy and network design, particularly off the back of the fact that the work that had been done had indicated that all of the things that had been identified were still not going to be enough. There was going to be the need to look at offline mass rapid transit in the future, and that the next step was considering what that might look like. As I said, we've had faster growth, slower investment, and now we actually have multiple private sector players who are interested, very interested and very motivated in offline mass rapid transport. So the key thing here is really looking at refreshing that strategy and network design around what would happen if we brought forward offline mass rapid transit, and what would we need that mass rapid transit to look like as part of a public transport system and an integrated high-performing network from a strategic perspective, not from a what they want to do perspective. And so that piece of work is really something that we need to do anyway. So there have been discussions started about kicking that off regardless of whether we're successful with a regional deal or not. But in order to partner with government on transport, that's really the first thing that needs to happen, because without it, we don't actually know exactly which things are going to give us the most value in the future. And so then associated with that, or off the back of that, we're also asking for bespoke settings that would enable timely partnership with the private sector to bring multiple private sector players into the conversation about what that future network might look like. And if we're going to have offline mass rapid transit, a streamlined way of obtaining a corridor for that. There'd also need to be changes to the public transport funding model to look at how that a long-term relationship would be able to be incorporated. And then obviously it's not all about offline mass rapid transit. There is still a lot of other things that need to happen in the wider network in the shorter term being 10 years, the longer term, 30 years. You know, we need to be considering things like the Kawerau Gorge, the linkage between Queenstown, Wanaka and Cromwell, but also, yeah, we've got a lot of bridges that are at end of life. We have a lot of roading improvements that are also necessary, even if we go down the offline mass rapid transit road. And so what we're also after here is for the government to basically facilitate establishing some alternative methods for delivering those other things, because based on the current approach to transport funding, they're not going to be funded. So this is essentially not, well, this might include reprioritisation of the NLTP funding, because if we get a deal, it's because they're saying, you know, we're one of the top 3 contributors to economic growth in New Zealand. So we think that the prioritisation for transport funding should be updated to address that. But it might also be looking at other things like how can we use IFFA arrangements, how can we use PPPs, how can we partner with the private sector in other ways that we maybe haven't thought of yet, how could we use tolling or congestion charging, how could we use development levies, how might the IVL contribute to this. So essentially working with us to establish different ways of delivering those projects. So one of the other key areas from an infrastructure and services perspective that we've identified in the deal is health. So this, you will also be familiar that in the Central Otago and Queenstown Lakes, we have a significant deficit in health services available. There is a significant, the majority of people who live 2 hours away from a base hospital live in our districts. And so what has happened in the area is that there's been an independent person who's done a piece of work and who has done this work overseas and has identified a range of private sector opportunities in terms of their private health providers who are looking at bringing private health services to the district, and identified that there would be opportunities for Te Whatu Ora to partner with them to also get public services, to leveraging the fact that they're coming anyway. And so the key thing out of that piece of work is not necessarily the private opportunities themselves, but the identification of different private-public partnership models that could be used in order to leverage private sector opportunities. And so the ask here is, first of all, that Health NZ does a health needs assessment for the combined districts, which hasn't been done, and that they use our population and visitor projections, which they haven't done in the past. They've actually already agreed to that. Yay! And they have actually also started accelerating. They actually have started the health needs assessment, which is possibly a good sign. Because at the moment, there is no investment in our districts from, there's nothing in their 10-year plan for us, like literally zero. So the fact that they've accelerated this, we're hoping is a good sign. And so then associated with that health needs assessment, it's, you know, that Te Whatu Ora commits to actually designing and developing these public-private partnership models of care, and then uses that together with the needs assessment and whatever opportunities are available in the district to then actually progress some partnered models of care to fill some of the gaps that are identified by the health needs assessment.
Thanks, Ben. I'll just jump in and sorry, I should have said at the start too, for those online, you might hear what sounds like a bit of feedback, but it's not. It's just some lovely roadworks we've got going on now right outside the window. We can hear you fine, and we'll make sure people talking in the chamber use their microphones, so hopefully you can hear us all right as well.
All right, okay, so the other thing from a infrastructure perspective is that we don't at the moment have commitment to electricity supply, which is slightly concerning. There's work that's happening by Transpower and others at the moment on a regional electricity plan. part of the ask here is actually getting the government to leverage where they can, because actually the regulatory environment for electricity is quite complicated in terms of the government's ability to influence, is to ensure that that work actually considers some different approaches in terms of the cost to residents of the affected districts, and if there are ways that that cost can be spread wider. The other element of this is actually looking at how do we enable a bit of a kind of innovation hub around alternative energy, in particular solar, and how can we accelerate the uptake of rooftop batteries and, sorry, not rooftop batteries, rooftop solar and batteries in the district. And part of that is a ratepayer assistance scheme that LGNZ, LGFA have been working on with rewiring Aotearoa. And there's indications that the government is supportive of this already, but we are asking for, let's trial that in our districts. Next one. The last one is really about how do we capture the value from growth and visitors and reinvest it back into critical infrastructure and affordable housing. So in terms of, so the development that happens in the district, a lot of the value increases from that development. The developers take the value from that, where the infrastructure providers, being the councils, have to accelerate work, undertake unplanned work, and the funding models for growth are not great. So growth generally doesn't pay for growth in the timelines that we need it to in order for investment to be efficient and to happen when it needs to happen. And so there's a couple of components here. One is looking at if mining were to be given the go-ahead in Central Otago, then the government will be getting royalties from that. And so the ask here is, if they are going to proceed with the mine, then some of those royalties should go back to invest in infrastructure that is affected by the growth of the mine and another economic development opportunities across, in particular, Central Otago. This is where we're bringing in the local visitor levy. We've asked for some bespoke settings to try and get a more kind of fair approach to growth paying for growth. And part of that is looking at how developers can contribute to a perpetual pipeline of affordable housing through the housing trust model. So we have a community housing trust in Queenstown already, and if we were to go down this path, then that would extend, or there might be an additional one in Central Otago that would be able to implement this approach. And I think that's all.
Richard.
I was just going to hand over. So that's the summary. I think it's a good place to just stop and talk about the light touch proposal content first and foremost, and then we can have a second conversation around the next stages of selected. So,
all right, yeah. So we could go back to any of those and have questions or thoughts. Kate.
Thanks, Penny. I like what I saw on the first sentence on page 5, but I can't see agriculture anywhere else in there, and the productivity that we get out of you reference the landscape is now really important to keep, but that is agriculture, and I'm loath to see no investment, and I know that there have been and continue to be discussions about water being part of that. I can't see this as getting outside or leading tourism out of Queenstown, or that it doesn't have a focus outside of Queenstown either, which I think was the intention. It just doesn't push it, or doesn't sort of articulate it. It sort of makes Queenstown the focus rather than it being pushing things out to the region, or the Brad region. So I'm just concerned about those two aspects.
So the key thing in terms of extending beyond Queenstown is all of these tools that we're talking about would apply to both Queenstown Lakes and Central Otago, and they might be applied differently in each of those places. But what would drive how they're applied is the particular strategies that are in place already in both of those districts. So when we're talking about increasing the value from tourism, there are some areas where we have common views, and Dylan maybe can talk to this a bit more, of things that would help both districts, like increasing post-visit sales. So there's been a joint piece of work done that applies in both areas. The work there in terms of how you get people to buy more products from the districts after they leave would be done equally in both areas. The particular destination management plans in each area would drive the actual projects that we're talking about here in terms of increasing productivity or supporting new sectors. So whilst there's a reasonable amount of talk of tourism in here, part of that is because that is the government's, that's one of the government's priorities, so we're trying to use their language. But in terms of Queenstown Lakes and Central Otago, we do actually have different tourism drivers. So in Queenstown Lakes, we want to focus on increasing productivity of tourism, not necessarily increasing the numbers of tourism, whereas in Central Otago, they want to do both. And so the ability to have tools that enable us to do those things together is what we're asking for in the deal. And so we talked to the Central Otago councillors about this yesterday. And Dylan, maybe you can comment on this, but we had this a similar discussion with them, and I thought they were pretty comfortable that these are the kind of tools that are useful for Central Otago, very useful for Central Otago as well as Queenstown Lakes, and that how they're applied would be we would work on together through the deal, the delivery of the deal.
Dylan's about to talk, I think.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, look, just picking up on those points, and we discussed this quite a bit yesterday with our councillors. Agriculture is definitely a highlighted sector, although it may not come through specifically in each slide. It is absolutely a focus, and clearly for our area. I guess the way we spoke about it yesterday in regard to tourism is we would be silly to ignore the fact that Queenstown is or has a brand, a profile that we don't have, but we want to be able to leverage that. So we're talking about using Queenstown and the brand as a means to attract investment into the region. Now, the region being Central Otago and Queenstown. So we think that complements it, and tourism is part of our economy as well. It's actually our third largest sector behind agriculture is number one, construction number two. So it still plays an important role for us as well. I think, as we all know, it can lead on to further things, whether that be people moving here because of their experience or future investment. So it plays an important role, but it's not the only, and we discussed that yesterday. There's definitely agriculture in there. The health is critical for our region. That is obviously highlighted in there quite strongly. Transport and other things are in there as well. So our councillors were comfortable with where the direction that this is heading, if that helps.
Thanks, Dylan. So I'll just add a couple of things. One is that this material is from the Light Touch proposal. So we appreciated at the time there was commentary around strengthening language in the agriculture sector because it wasn't in there strongly. That has been discussed, and again, picking up the comments today, it'll be interesting to hear what other councillors have got to say in terms of how that might then translate into language further down the process if there's a need to. The other comment around it being QRDC focused, that has come up as well. And I think that is a reflection of the work that Penny and her team have carried on behalf of the deal to get it across that first hurdle. But clearly it is a regional deal, and as things progress, ensuring that ORC, CODC and QRDC feel that priorities are reflected in any future material is going to be something that needs to be massaged as we move along, albeit there still needs to be some priorities there. And I think a key thing is that they do need to speak to the government priorities as well, because ultimately that's the decision that they will make around which deal they move forward with. So I know from discussions with CEs, with Mike and Peter, that agriculture very much has been in the mix and talked about as something. Water has come up, and resilience and the importance of resilience in the freshwater space for not just agricultural growth, but actually community resilience and the ability to support housing growth, support existing communities, the resilience of those communities. So those things have come up. They're not reflected specifically in here because this speaks to the light touch proposal material.
All right, we've got quite a lot of hands up there, so I'll just do them left to right. Kevin, then Andrew, then Elliot. You right, Kevin?
Yep, got me. Thank you. Look, I just want to reiterate what Councillor Wilson has said. The key driver of this government, as I understand, and continually brought back to me, is productivity. And I would loathe to think that these other very important parts would diminish the importance of agriculture to the whole region, and especially up in that area with potential. And the fact that we haven't anywhere in that light touch talked about major water storage, the likes of a Falls Dam and other opportunities that will actually, at the end of the day, if we have another COVID type event, there'll be only one sector that will keep things going, and that will be agriculture. So whoever is part of this negotiating team, there needs to be an exceptionally hard push to say that the productivity when tourism can't function is a key, and regardless of tourism is functioning or not, is the key driver of New Zealand's economy, and that's a key driver that government's pushing. So I would hope to think that we, the words aren't on here. You've mentioned agriculture once, but that's a key part to paying bills.
Thank you, Kevin. Andrew.
Yeah, thanks, Gretchen. And thanks, Penny and Anita, for the presentation thus far. My question's around the way that the legislation has been set up and how it's filtered down thus far. And I appreciate, as Richard said, it's an evolving process. But the private sector's mentioned God knows how many times in your presentation. So my question's around how do we and when do we connect directly with some of the shakers and movers that have the ability potentially to stump up with alternative funding, and you talk about the transport sector, the innovation, etc. Because clearly you've had some conversations with some in the health sector, for example, and it's not so much connecting with them at an early stage, but I think from a government's perspective, we need to somehow get a little bit closer to those conversations, if that makes sense.
Penny, do you
Yep.
want to touch on that?
Yep. Oh, Richard, were you going to say something?
No, Penny, you're up first. Yep.
Okay. So there are a reasonable number of motivated and well-funded private sector players in both the transport and health space, and we have had conversations with all of them. One of the difficult things with this is obviously as public sector, we can't just go into kind of commercial conversations with private sector players, and we have to ensure that when we are approaching new investments, that we go through appropriate and fair processes for doing that in terms of procurement. And so that does make it difficult to engage with specific people that might appear more motivated and appear better funded than others. But that's one of the asks that we're asking for, particularly in relation to transport, is for the government to provide a mechanism where we can bring in not just one, but multiple private sector players into those conversations earlier than we otherwise would. So under the current settings, we would have to go through a whole process of strategic direction setting and design that doesn't include those players, because we will be asking them to respond to procurement later in the process. And so part of what we are asking for through the deal is for a discussion with government about, is there a mechanism where you can bring those players in earlier to actually, so we can consider their innovation, their thinking, as part of considering network designs, because that's not the way we would normally do it. And the way we normally do it is there for very good reasons in terms of safeguarding. And so what you've raised is exactly the difficulty with the position that we're in. We do have a lot of private sector interest in helping us, but how we engage them in an efficient, fair, appropriate way to leverage what they have to offer is definitely a challenge to be worked through as part of this.
So is it something that the Otago Regional Council should be raising directly with the government or the ministers responsible?
Well, that's probably a question for Gretchen and Richard, but
Yep.
Yep.
Thank you.
The more advocacy we can have for that, probably the better.
Yeah, so I think, Andrew, the opportunity, particularly, I mean, if we look at the transport space and the, was related to the discussion we had at annual plan yesterday, we've got some very active players in that market, and they don't fit within the traditional models. So I don't think there's any harm outside of the regional deal process in raising that, both at my staff level with NZTA equivalents, but potentially at a governance level to say, look, in order for us to be able to move forward, we may need to think about different ways of doing things.
Thank you.
It's a good question, Andrew, indeed. Elliot.
Yeah, I've got plenty of comments that I'll save till we're at that point. So I just had two questions, and the first one was just around that growth. I think was the first topic in the slide deck, and just around the bit around establishing bespoke settings to attract new businesses in targeted sectors. I was just wondering what that means, like what kind of settings are we talking about with that? Like, is there any examples that you had in mind?
Yeah, there's two case studies for that in the detailed proposal, which I don't have in front of me. But they would be things like tax incentives, immigration settings, things, and they would be specific to specific sectors. So this was one of the discussions we had with CODC's council yesterday, is that would incorporate regulatory, tax, immigration, whatever things that government can influence that might help boost the agriculture sector further, for example. Or it might be things that will help us attract new technology businesses. Or it might be things that would enable us to build a film studio in partnership with some American investors. There's lots. It would be. We've included a couple of case studies in the proposal, but that's something that would be work. I would expect that if we're successful, we might have some rolling examples of that, and they would be things that would apply broadly across different sectors.
That's probably another sector where we've had significant private interest, and particularly film studios.
Yeah.
Awesome. No, that makes sense. And then just the other question was, what came out of the CODC and QLDC workshops that they had over the last 2 days?
We've had discussions around this. Actually, we didn't get to talking much about this part of it with QLDC, but QLDC's council have talked about the actual packages a lot more than the other councils, because we had been talking to them about it before it became a partnership. And I think from both councils there was support for the negotiation approach, which we haven't got to yet, which is the establishment of a committee and an independent negotiator to be the kind of key interface points with government.
Dylan, any extra insights from CODC?
Oh, look, I think Penny summed it up pretty well. Essentially, I guess we got positive feedback from our councillors yesterday in workshop to keep progressing. And we'll put some decision papers in front of them towards the end of June, should we be invited to keep progressing. But no, green light essentially from our councillors to keep moving. They were happy with what they were seeing.
And I think, Dylan, is it fair to say that actually as we talked about these packages, and this was actually the one you just asked about, Elliot, was one of the ones we talked about. I got a feeling from the CODC councillors that having the opportunity to talk about how these would apply for Central Otago, that they were a lot more comfortable with the fact that this is a balanced deal for both districts.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely fair reflection of the conversation. We didn't get through them all. I kind of flipped our presentation the other way around. So the second part of your workshop you're about to do, we did first yesterday. So we didn't quite get through all the slides that you've just looked at now around the proposal, but as I say, supportive, and I think they certainly, as Penny's just said, saw a lot more in it for Central Otago than they probably did in the first glance. We first put it in front of them a few months ago.
It's really good to hear, Dylan. Awesome. Any other questions? Tim?
Yeah, look, if the regional deal proposal is not approved, I mean, these issues are not going to go away.
Correct.
Yeah, so we're in agreement on that. Are there any things at the moment that we could just roll on with, perhaps like the mass rapid transport options, just you know, without having to wait for some sort of approval to come through over a regional deal? I mean, it has to happen anyway. So, I mean, that's just an example. Are there any other types of projects that we should just be rolling on with together? Anyway.
Should I speak to transport first, Penny, and then I think maybe you can talk about how some of the others might apply and what sort of thinking is that the answer, Tim, is yes. So we know that public transport as it's currently set out will not provide a solution for the problems that are in Queenstown. The regional gives us an opportunity probably to get to a solution quicker than having to lobby for alternative ways of doing things in our standard lane. But we are already having some of those conversations. That was what Andrew alluded to before, is should we just be out lobbying and seeking some the ability to do some of these things anyway. And the first item on the transport one, refreshing the transport strategy and network design, has to happen anyway. I mean, we need to do that because we need to understand what a future transport model with all of the different modes, including mass rapid, would enable. So some of these things will happen as part of, you know, the normal partnership we have with QRDC and NZTA anyway. This just offers us an opportunity to do things slightly differently with some different funding models and potentially some different legislation to make it a bit easier.
That's a good question, and yeah, obviously had regional public transport planning hearings just recently and annual planning, and thinking about how we serve public transport and whether we do business cases, etc., and also at the same time looking at a complete overhaul of the strategy of transport in this area, which serves more than just Queenstown, and it's reflected there as well with the commuter routes we will need as well. So we do need to do some thinking immediately, really, about how we pull all that together. Yep, good question, Kate.
And I appreciate that Southland isn't part of Central Otago, but the just checking the link south to Kingston, is that also considered in this mix when it comes to transport?
It will be. So, I mean, we know there's two parts to that south conversation. One is the extent of potential development in that southern corridor, and the second is the ongoing link in the not only residential development in Kingston, but just connections through to Southland. So that southern corridor is always talked about as part of that strategic plan.
It's good. I mean, again, doesn't, because it's heading south, it doesn't really indicate here, but it is just going to be a problem similar to all those other roads very shortly. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyone else? Lloyd?
Yeah, just for myself, so this refresh is basically the light touch proposal was forwarded up to the government a couple of months ago. So it's not really, we're not in a time right now that we can change stuff within the actual proposal. It's really just refreshing us as to what's in the proposal. and the time.
Yeah, look, that was the purpose of today, was to provide a bit of a refresh and just to gather some commentary around if we were selected to go forward. Obviously that light touch was only a proposal. It was never the final product. It was just to try and get through the door or get to the table is probably the better analogy, to be able to have a discussion. But there's very much the opportunity to develop that in conversation with the government, because we're going to have to be listening to what's important for them and then what's important for the three councils collectively in terms of what we want for the region. So today was more just a refresh and to gather comments like the ones from Kate and Kevin and then others. So that was the purpose of today's workshop.
Yeah, but we're not really, that's what's happening into the future, and we can
Yes, that's right.
negotiate and develop to get to some actual actions that may happen.
That's right.
You know, that's all good. That's what I thought. Well, I was just thinking, like, at the end of the day, from my perspective, sitting in regional council as chair, it's really our job to enable the development or the plan that's put in place that's negotiated, and that's going to include your resilience and enabling resilience, but and enable the development of tourism, but at the same time protecting the environment or ensuring the environment is taken into account during that process as well, as opposed to like picking individual winners. Yeah.
You're good, Alan, at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I've got any questions right now. I guess my comment would be the way the summary is cast here does sit more comfortably with me than that former light touch proposal. And I think that's because my recollection is there were some quite sort of specific things in there, whereas here it's saying actually let's just check out what that plan, and I guess that fits with what you're saying there, Richard. If this gets us to the table, then is the chance to talk about how that works better. And I guess, for example, I'm just looking on page 9 of the presentation on the health bit, we've got in there asking from government, commitment to the comprehensive health needs assessment. That's really important, rather than say let's do this, this, and this, without having a look at those real needs, which may have, and there'll be lots of people who have many good ideas about what those are anyway.
Yeah, we want to tell a simple as possible coherent story that hinges off the government's priorities as well as our own, and as Penny pointed out, ensuring that it's a really livable and attractive place for communities as well, which is what we're about as local government too. So yeah, I guess it's painting that picture clearly and telling that story. So it's good to hear that you're feeling comfortable, Alan, and we're hearing from Kate and Kevin and others as well that we just want to see that thing of agriculture and the benefits that we can have there of productivity, resilience. It's who we are as well, and yeah, I don't know if it's captured enough or not, but it's good to hear that Central Otago we're seeing that picture and the story as well, and how that can be built in, because it's obviously a thing that's really important to Central Otago too. Anyway, hopefully we got some feedback there. Do we need to do more with this section on priorities? We've got a bit of a flavour there.
Yeah, that was useful, and there will be there will have to be a paper on this, so there'll be an opportunity to make formal comment. So as I said at the start, we're aiming for that the June meeting at this stage if it's needed. So, but that was useful just to understand, I guess, positions and top of mind things based on that summary.
Thanks, Richard. We're on to the next section. Penny, are you going to kick this one off as well?
I can. Did you want me to do that, Richard, or did you want to do it?
I'll run through some of it in summary, Penny, and then maybe you can just fill in the gaps, probably help answer some questions. So, I mean, that background is effectively what we talked through at the start. So submitted in February, expecting a cabinet decision June, July. 3 proposals accepted, one to be finalised later this year. So this is all what we are expecting. There's certainly no guarantees, as we know, in these sort of spaces. And the key thing, I guess, and the reason we're having a conversation around this next thing, the negotiating, the way in which we might negotiate, is that the expectation is that the government will be ready to go. So any regional deals, groupings, councils need to be ready to go as well. So as I said, there's been discussions with DIA around process, and they have been able to share with us what they feel the government expectations in this space will be. So we understand one official to negotiate on behalf of government, and they will have delegations to make decisions for impacted agencies, and that's to do with pace as much as anything, the not needing to go back and forward between different government agencies. There'll be someone who is delegated to make those decisions to enable things to keep moving. Then on our side, again, the DIA are clear, they can't dictate to councils how we go into this, but they can certainly indicate some preferences based on the discussions they're having in Wellington. And so those 3 bullet points there capture I guess 3 key things that they put forward in terms of preference. So a small group of officials with some delegations to make decisions, 1 representative at most from each council, and then officials, not politicians, due to risks associated with timing of elections. So that was their preference. That's not necessarily what you'll get from staff as our preference. So we'll work through what that is now, and then this is the bit it'd be really good to have a discussion on. So key elements of the negotiation approach: decision-making authority. So who's going to be authorised to make decisions on behalf of the 3 councils should we get to that point? The negotiator, so who will meet and directly negotiate with the government appointed negotiator if that's the direction that the government take. And then bottom lines, and that's related to the conversation that we just had around content. What are the parameters with which decisions can be made by that negotiator or by that group that have got decision-making authority? And then regardless of the approach, there will need to be a cross-council working group. So at the moment, Anita is our ELT representative on that working group, given that there is a connection both to our regional planning and clearly transport as well. And we may well need other subject matter experts, and then there'll need to be some secretariat support as well. It's assumed that, and this goes back to the conversation and the question that Andrew asked and Penny responded to before, that private sector engagement is excluded at this point unless there's a direction from government otherwise. And that is again around that future procurement and how we manage that part of the process as well. So options in terms of moving forward, a joint subcommittee made up of mayors, chairs and another elected member and the CEs, and that the councils, the 3 councils delegate to that subcommittee or give them some specific delegations. And we've put in there a few options. Make all decisions related to the regional deal, so not recommended, so effectively give it total delegation on anything related to the regional deal. Appointed negotiator make decisions within the bottom lines, and that is the one that we think has some substance and a good way to go forward to give us the flexibility, but also retain some rigor in terms of those bottom lines and those guardrails, I guess, if you like, in terms of the negotiations. And then make decisions within the bottom lines, appoint a negotiator. There's going to need to be some delegation and some ability for that group to make decisions and move things forward without continuing to come back to council, and we are fairly certain that will be a government expectation, and that's just around timing and the ability of the thing to continue moving. So that's all, that final one there, all decisions related to the regional deal made by 3 full councils. So that would effectively be any time there's a decision-making point, we would need to come back to the paper that each council would need to. And again, that won't meet the expectations of the government. It doesn't demonstrate a real commitment to working as a collective group. So we would suggest that that is not a good approach to put forward as a way to negotiate and move forward. The negotiator option. So and again we will have to wait and see. First of all, if we're selected, and then when we're selected, can we get some clearer expectations from DIA? But the option of an independent negotiator who has specific experience in sitting down with government and negotiating deals or work programs, we see some real value in having someone like that on board to support the councils through this process. So who that would be is unknown. It would depend on availability. And that's always a challenging thing.
Get the answer already.
Oh, did it come up as?
When he presented to us, he said, "No, I've got the person for you."
Oh,
yeah. I mean, it's all Queenstown. Sorry,
So that's well, I'm not aware of who the person is. So that we do have we think that will be quite an important part of the process to have that person sitting there and experienced in those sort of conversations with government. A negotiating team made up of the CEs. We don't think that's a good solution. Unless, and that comes back to the fact that we have heard a preference for a single person or someone who can represent the group. And then all same way, team made up of the mayor's chairs or elected members of the 3 partner councils. Decision-making authority, so the joint subcommittee, which we touched on previously, with some delegations to be able to move it forward. And there would need to be some agreement in terms of the parameters under which that joint committee would operate. That will require formally setting up through council processes. It will need to be done relatively quickly. We're obviously also conscious that there's an election coming up, so we would need to think about how anything that is set up traverses elections at the end of the year as well. And then the negotiator, so independent with specific skills relating to these sorts of processes. So it was a chance now to ask some questions about that and have a discussion probably led by you, Gretchen, just in terms of how this council feels around that, I guess, recommendation to formally establish not just a joint working group, but actually a proper joint committee with delegations to enable us to proceed.
And a joint committee could keep going over the after elections, before elections.
I just maybe, Penny, is there anything that I fundamentally got wrong or that you would like to add to that?
No, the only comment I just make, probably in response to, I just heard Kate make a comment there, the independent facilitator, the intent of the independent there is that the person that is selected is someone that all 3 of the partner councils feel can fairly represent them. So that's why it isn't someone, it's not one of the mayors, one of the CEs, one of the ex-mayors. It's intended to be independent in that it's someone that all 3 councils feel would fairly represent all 3 councils' views in those discussions.
Yeah, there isn't someone that we've got.
No, there isn't someone that we've got yet.
Thanks, yeah, cool. Tim.
Yeah, look, that process looks pretty good. The thing that stands out for me is the decision-making authority and delegations that you've mentioned. It's, you're probably all over this, but you're going to need some sort of delegation authority or a term of reference or something like that that's worked out. So, I mean, that can be worked out now.
Yes, so it'll have to go through each council and then be formally joint committee formally set up in terms of reference established, the same way we currently establish our own council committees. So it is done, it's done elsewhere. Otago's never been, although we do have the land transport, the committee that is a joint committee, but outside of that, it's not been something that Otago's done in the past. So, but it is something that is used elsewhere in the country. It's not uncommon. So there are definitely processes, and we can already get those underway if we understand that councils are comfortable.
That might be one of those things that you can get onto right away, so that you're ready.
Yep. Any other comments?
Just on that, the intent is that the paper that comes at the end of June to all three councils will incorporate a lot of that, a lot more information about that. So in terms of actually establishing the joint committee, including, I'm hoping, terms of reference.
Yeah, so getting a little bit of a hint today if you want to on your bottom lines as well, if you probably haven't thought too much about that, but welcome to throw some forward. Yeah. Okay, Dylan's hand is up.
I probably thought it just important to note yesterday, although no decisions were made because we were in a workshop, but we were given direction by our councillors that they support this model that is in front of you right now. So that's helpful as we put a decision paper in front of them later in June. Obviously, should we be invited? So just so you know where CODC sits.
That's really helpful. Thanks, Dylan. Andrew.
Yeah, I like the idea of a negotiator. I think that, someone who has already established connections with the government, who can basically hit the ground running, because this thing, if it all goes ahead, it will move at pace. And I just think of someone who's got that right skill set would be incredibly valuable in this role. So very much supportive of that independent negotiator.
Thanks, Andrew. Yep, Ellen.
Yeah, yes, no, I agree. What those recommendations as you've run through there, Richard, does make sense to me, and we've noted up there. Partner councils agree on bottom lines and make decisions outside these. So the challenge may be working out those bottom lines.
And look, as with any joint committee, there will have to be really good communication between the representatives of any council and the balance of councillors, because you are giving them a role to play as part of that joint committee, but they're also there to ensure that the voices of the council table are captured through that process. Albeit they'll have a terms of reference and we'll be working collectively, there's still that good flow of communication and understanding what's going on and understanding the feelings of the council table that you take into that joint committee process.
Lloyd.
Well, yeah, just realistically, there's only one option to make, because the alternatives are either not going to be acceptable to the councils or not acceptable to the government. So at the end of the day, it's the system that we've got, and I think it's just a matter of putting the parameters around exactly what Alan was saying, the bottom lines, and at what stage you come back to your councils, but also ensuring in the terms of reference or wherever that there's good feedback loops, so that the councils know, pretty regularly where everything's at, because it will be moving at pace, and it's just we just don't want to ever find ourselves in a position where the stuff gets out into the public before the councils actually know about it. So I think it's just make sure we got those checks and protections in place. And at the end of the day, it's like everything with these things, the key decision is getting the right person. So I think we need to make the decision that that's the way to go and find the dude or the person, yeah. So I think that's realistically that's where it's happening.
Yep, seems to be logical, doesn't it? And the steer that the government wants to hit things at pace, but wants people that can make decisions and demonstrate that they work together well as well, which is important with the joint committee established. We could demonstrate that really well.
Elliott's just popped a comment in, so I'll just read it. So approach outline looks sensible to me. Bottom lines and content concerns are where he has more input. So the negotiation approach supported, but more comments around bottom lines and content by the sounds of it.
Yeah, that's the thing I was about to say as well. yeah, Tim's led with that as well. It's the obvious question of how will we develop up the parameters around this and the time frame to achieve that. So Penny said that we would receive something at the end of June. So prior to that, because we don't want to be thrashing around, oh, that's really unacceptable at that point to councils.
Big council that week.
Yeah, and also just if we do, because we don't know, do we need to start negotiating come July? We want to be ready to go, so Tim's right, Yep.
So we can, with this, today finishes the 3 workshops just to introduce or to sort of bring back a summary of the light touch and then introduce the conversation about how we might set ourselves up collectively if we're chosen. We'll get together as CEs, but also the working group to just discuss what else then we may need to do between now and bringing a paper to June if that's the direction we head. And that may involve some further conversations for this council ahead of that, just around where some of those the bottom lines or the content things need to be. We've obviously heard a few of them today, but I'm sure there's a bit more. You know, Alex got a few things, and I'm sure there'll be some others who have some thoughts in that space as well. We do. I'm just looking. If we've sort of got to the end of it, we don't have to use the time. I'm not advocating filling up the workshop time for the sake of it, but if there was anything else just to put on the table now that would assist the working group, because ultimately the more we know, the better informed we are in terms of next steps, and that might be useful.
Yeah, so we're in a public workshop at the moment, but yeah, we can certainly put forward ideas for. Do you want to go back to the first part of the meeting, or just go on to the parameters in general? Yeah, any ideas that people have, we can build on that. Like the first bit and the second bit.
Well, in the presentation, we got a big thing about health, and I think health is really important. Don't get me wrong, and it's potential. But if it's just talking about Queenstown again, which is what we got presented just now, and doesn't acknowledge that Clyde does have a hospital, and that's important to the area, and also acknowledge the government investment already, I think it's a misplay of the issues. And I get the issues in Queenstown, but we also have to acknowledge that there are other health services there that cannot be put in jeopardy forward in this plan. So, and that's how you present stuff.
Yeah, thanks, Kate. It came across for the Queenstown flavour to Kate, but Dylan's got his hand up, and Penny can see whether or not that was the intention as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Gretchen. Look, Kate, I can promise you, I can assure you, it is not talking about only Queenstown or Queenstown getting anything other than we need to do a needs assessment and understand what that needs assessment is for the whole region. So we're not talking about any particular one project or health facility in that piece of work. It is, there's some solutions needed. Clyde may or may not be part of that, as equally Queenstown may or may not be part of that. But until we do the needs assessment, we don't truly know what that looks like.
Thank you.
Yeah, so the needs assessment is to cover the joint districts, and in the full proposal, there were, I think, 6 example private-public partnership projects given, and some of those were in Central Otago. So the piece of work has had a steering group over it that had the Mayor of Central Otago, as well as the Queenstown Lakes Mayor, and all of the relevant MPs have been on it. So it has, that piece of work has definitely had a joined up Central Otago, Queenstown Lakes focus on it from the beginning.
Great to hear. Thanks for clarifying that. Elliot.
Yeah, so just to confirm, is it helpful for me to bring up, I don't know,
Go for it.
hesitations and stuff now, or is that better to wait? Okay.
Yeah, mind, yep.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've got reservations about the whole regional deals approach in general, but that's sort of the approach that the government's set out. So I'll put those aside for today. But I guess if we want to run through the those topics, I think the growth one around those establishing bespoke settings, I think, can be good. It's just going to really depend on the details and what those settings are. And I think that's the case for a lot of these things is I'm just very wary. Like if we take film, for example, in this growth example, very keen for the film industry to grow in the Central Lakes area. Definitely think there's a lot of opportunity there. But the last time we changed regulatory settings, well, maybe not the last time, but thinking about the Hobbit laws, was a disaster for workers' rights. And so I'm just wary of any sector where we're sort of establishing bespoke settings and what those settings are going to be. The transport stuff I think is really promising and necessary. I think my main hesitation is around updating those PT funding models, which I think we do need to allow things like offline MRT and even the bus services that aren't possible under this GPS or didn't get NLTF funding. If it's something like bringing in congestion charging to fund that, can like absolutely get behind that. If it's to allow private-public partnerships, be a bit wary of that. I think the details would be key to ensuring such a change doesn't undermine fully public funded PT service elsewhere in the region or even the country or the future growth of those services. And if it's redistributing NLTF funding, I don't think I'd be happy with that because this just means, other investments are losing out, and I'm not sure how comfortable I'd be with that. Again, just a bit wary of PPP with the health topic. Any energy resilience and electrification plans, very supportive of those. And I think outside of the regional deals process, if we don't progress or get it, I think as ORC we should be looking way closer at this stuff and working with CODC and QLDC on this stuff and reflecting that in our climate strategy. So, very supportive of that. And then the value capture stuff, supportive of most of those, and I think that's sort of the main thrust and what we're actually getting from central government, because there's no funding from central government, but changing some of those revenue tools, congestion pricing and visitor levies and stuff is would be a win for the region. But as we've sort of expressed before, I'm uncomfortable with pushing for redirecting mining royalties. My reservations there remain. I think it's probably going to be a tiny amount. If it was an additional royalty on top of the current royalties rather than just redistributing the current royalties, that might be a different conversation. But even then, very uncomfortable with us as the regulator sort of signing on to something that I think kind of implicitly, if we're expecting future growth through fast track consents, it sort of undermines any arguments we might make with one hand against applications if with the other hand we're asking for some of the money from those applications before they've been accepted. And I think this plan mostly revolves around tourism and agriculture, and they're both undermined by some of those potential mining proposals, given the impacts on the landscapes that define the tourism, as well as freshwater and other things that are going to impact agriculture. And then just across all those topics, there's a lot of things mentioning regulatory settings and trying to get those changed. I think some of that could be really helpful, but just again wary of that given our role as a regulator. And I'm just hoping there can be assurances that actions in the regional deal won't undermine our commitments or any of our existing plans or regional policy statement or things like that. But yeah, that's my concerns or hesitations about all of it, but otherwise pretty supportive, and there's some exciting stuff in there.
That was really good, Elliot. It's awesome to have all of that feedback. So thanks for your detailed thinking on pretty much all of the themes there. And
It's awesome.
Awesome, yeah, awesome. Penny, are you wanting to say something there or
No,
no?
just saying it's awesome.
Sorry, that was a lot.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, no, it's really good.
I'll just really quickly on the regulator piece, Elliot, we play a dual role across a number of areas, and I think our regulatory function, be it a direct regulatory function or as part of the fast track was the example you used, will stand regardless. I mean, that is something we have to navigate, you know, on if not daily, weekly basis with different projects that come through or different things we're involved in. So certainly understand the point. I'm relatively comfortable we can ensure that that we can retain that rigor in our regulatory process and meet those requirements. It's not too different to what we do currently.
That's great as well. Thanks for voicing that, Richard. I can see Dylan, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I'm actually probably about to say exactly the same thing as Richard, because obviously CODC is stuck in the same position as ORC when it comes to something that may be coming through a fast track and needing resource consents and things. So I guess what we've been very clear about is that the mine or any future mining activity, because we're not only talking about the current Santana proposal, but any future mining activity has to still go through its regulatory approval process. That is not predetermined by this. It is only if that is approved and progresses, then we would be seeking a return of some of the royalties. The question you raise, Elliot, is a really good one, and it's one we don't have an answer to, is this a re-sharing of the existing royalties that currently go to central government back down to our region, or is there a view from government and part of the negotiations that they'll actually increase the amount of levy that goes on any mining activity, and so central government retains a share and also a share comes this way. But what we do know is anything of that scale is going to have impact on our region, even if it's a really simple example would be if we have 500 additional workers come into our region, depending on where they live, we may need plant upgrades to wastewater and water treatment plants. So how do we account for that? And this is a mechanism to be able to do that, potentially.
Thank you, Dylan. Penny.
I was just going to follow up, sorry, Anita here, just what Dylan said regarding the fast track. We're the same in terms of we could potentially have another 6,000 houses approved by a fast track consent in our district. So we're the same. We want it to go through a due process, but what what we're indicating is if, for instance, they are approved, then this is an opportunity to give some benefit back to our community, like we did through the Special Housing Areas Act. So what, as part of that, we'd be asking for 5% of that land to be returned back, provided to the Housing Trust to be used for perpetual housing. But by stating that, in no way does that mean we support those fast track applications. It's just that if they were approved, that we want that, that positive, to get something back for our community.
Thank you, Kate.
Just asking the funding, funding for everything is the fraught one here. And we talked about local government New Zealand having a model before, I think, Penny. Yeah, I'm just wondering at what point that's at, and what engagement with the government, because it is only one, but it can be quite a pivotal one, even for quality. There's a whole lot of reasons you'd use it. Yeah.
The ratepayer assistance scheme?
Yeah.
That's it, yeah.
Yeah, so that's a scheme that they've been working on for some time. They've been working on the solar and batteries element of it with rewiring Aotearoa, but it is a broader scheme that would be available to councils for other things. I understand that where it's at is that it has in principle agreement from government, but they need to progress it to formal kind of decisions, which is why we've still got it present in our proposal. It seems to be moving quite fast at the moment.
Yeah, they're great. And then the other part of that engagement is it doesn't have to just be local government New Zealand necessarily doing that funding, because a lot of people don't seem to be in local government New Zealand anymore. And who knows how long it will last, but it's understanding how banks and or things like KiwiSaver investment accounts and stuff are working in that space as well, because then you also get the housing options that they're certainly in that space.
Yeah, that was discussed at the regional sector C's meeting last week, actually, and that before any councils dive into the space, because I use the example that we're looking at in terms of the strategy and potentially wastewater, there is a need to understand what the market's already doing, and then in terms of us and what we're presenting back through council, before we go and run away with our own bespoke option, we need to understand what the local government fund option is that's being worked on and progressed. So there's a bit happening in that space at the moment, hasn't it?
Okay. Thank
Um,
you.
And I was just going to add to that, I think even if this does progress through local government funding and other things, I think we would still want to put our hand up to be the pilot because we talk about increasing productivity of our region and obviously increasing quality of life. Well, that's a sector where we expect we can outperform other parts of the country, and we want to be that test bed and show that capability of our region, given that, you know, we'd like to call ourselves the home of renewable energy. It's a nice way to put a stamp on it too.
Yeah, that's great. Andrew, and a big special welcome to Alexa, who we can see has joined us. Great to see you. Awesome.
Thank you.
We can fill you in on where we're at and you can have a say in a minute. Andrew.
Yeah, thanks, Rich. And I haven't really got any bottom lines or priorities at this point in time. I've sort of got an open mind about, you know, how things will pan out. But just picking up on some of Elliot's points, and I sort of think of it this way with the regional deals, is where you've had ad hoc development, which has in some situations caused significant challenges for TAs to accommodate infrastructure needs, etc. Because this process is very much built on existing strategic direction, you may end up with much better outcomes going forward. So, you know, resilience, you know, will be strengthened, and just from a planning perspective, it seems to me a much more solid base to work off rather than random plan changes that are promoted by the private sector. So that was just my thoughts.
It's awesome, Andrew. Tim, yep.
I'm just wondering about the how the three partner councils actually integrate and contribute to this whole process. I mean, we each have a sphere of influence, and for us, it's public transport, agriculture, and consents, but we don't have any sphere of influence in public health, but we do have opinions on public health. So how is, I mean, we don't want to have an opinion of public health that's contrary to what's happening with QLEC, or, you know, so in terms of that contribution, would we just pull back from that discussion, or do we contribute into that discussion, or, you know, or do we just feel that we have to contribute where we're talking about public transport, consenting, and stay out of those other areas completely? I mean, what are the expectations?
So I think the expectation is with, you know, any partnership is that the different members will bring their areas of expertise and areas of interest to that group, and we will have some very specific ones that we're interested in ensuring are carried through to any potential deal. It doesn't stop people having an opinion and sharing an opinion on other things, but we've got to, as the regional council, it's probably two things. One is respect that there is expertise and opinions that sit within the TLAs that's probably more relevant to that area of the deal, but also just ensuring that all of the parties that are committed to the partnership are doing things that are in the best interest of the region. And if that's fundamentally what's driving the things that are being put forward in the deal, then I don't think that there are any issues. You know, if that's the number one principle that's applied, that things that are in the deal we know are in the best interests of the region, that's the key test. But I think, you know, we would bring to the partnership specific expertise and interest in particular areas, but we may still have an opinion on others, but we should be conscious that the TAs are probably better informed and more connected in some of those spaces than we are.
Yeah, I guess one of the things I'm thinking about, I really value Elliot's contribution, but is the development of the film hub in Queenstown, and Elliot's concerns about the impact perhaps on low wages, or, you know, the downstream impacts. That actually isn't an area of ORC concern. It's not what we, it's not in our sphere of influence, but it's an opinion.
You could probably say it's in none of our direct employment sphere of
Yeah, well,
concerns,
I'm
but
I'm sure that
it's of interest
QLDC's
to us.
business development people have got a different, and perhaps a
Not
more informed
directly.
opinion about that sort of
Unless
thing.
it's in the industry, Yeah. I guess, yeah, as local government and as leaders, I think Richard's right, we're allowed to have an opinion on it, but, yeah, that's right, the government will be there as well as a partner. So we respect their opinion and their function and their responsibilities and hear from them as well. So, yeah.
And bearing in mind, the things that are put forward by ORC, not by individuals. So, you know, it's a collective view of the ORC that is then carried forward into the joint committee process, not individual views.
But yeah, it's a good point, and it's, yeah, kind of where I lead at the beginning of what is our role to discuss that as well as an enabler and what our priorities are, because what our priorities are directly is different from what our priorities are as a proposal. Yep. Rightio. So Alexia, I think you've joined us halfway through, but we've had a great discussion here going back over the light touch proposal, and it was fine-tuned into telling the story more directly and coherently, I guess. And then we've talked about how we would negotiate, given that the government sent signals that that may happen as early as July, should the proposal be chosen. So we're just preparing for that, but yeah, we can't probably go over all the details again,
No.
but if anything you wanna, yeah, we can catch you up on that, but if you do know the light touch proposal, so we're having general thoughts if you wanna contribute.
No, thank you, and I'm good. I'll watch the video later. I have been through all the slides to have a look. I did have a few questions, but I won't articulate them now. I might just see what happened when I watch the video later.
That sounds great. Yep, thanks for being here. Okay, so what are your bottom lines or priorities? I know we need to finish off very soon, but I guess we have to work within the bounds of the law, first of all, so we probably have to work within the Local Government Act requirements for us to do with consultation and financial allocation and stuff like that. Is that would be the absolute bottom line? Yep. So things for spending would need probably to come back. Is that?
Oh, yeah, large financial commitments.
Yeah, that's an obvious one. But
Yeah, we can't devolve those responsibilities.
yeah.
I just note that we've had an email this morning with an embargoed announcement from the government, which is facilitating water storage. In that case, it would be good if we started actually, again, looking at the productivity they're looking at. And I'm sorry, then I want to reinforce the point that Richard made. When you talk water storage, it is about community stuff as much as anything else. It's not just about agriculture. In Central and in the lakes, the conflicts with water aren't that far away. And for community water supplies, if we don't have proximity. So
Thanks. No further thoughts? No. Alrighty, looks like we are done then. Thank you very much. It was really great to have both Central Otago and Queenstown representation there today. It is so good to be working together. I'd just like to say that. It has been, yeah, really cutting down a lot of barriers and building something that I think will be really enduring. So even though it's very early days, we're making really good progress working together really constructively. And I think this is evidencing that, as people have said, there's multiple work streams there that we have identified that we can be getting on with together no matter what happens. So that's extremely positive. Right, so I'll just close with the karakia. Kia tau te rangi Māori e, ki runga I ngā iwi o te ao. Let peace reign on all the peoples of the world. Thanks everyone for being here. See you later.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.